Welcome everyone to the Project 440 webinar on financial aid for musicians. I am Cigus Vanni. I am a retired high school counselor, retired back in June of 2016. I spent 15 years working at a college level, assistant dean of the college, college admissions, teaching some classes, and then 26 years as a high school counselor. I now serve as a college coach for Project 440, a wonderful group of people. Assisting me this evening is Chloe Cooper, who will be in charge of the chat. Chloe is a graduate of Project 440, one of our proud graduates, and along with a colleague of hers, a friend from Project 440, started her own community support group called Generation Music, which is very wonderful. And you should Google that and look at it. And you should send Chloe money, because now I'm going to tell you how to get money. And you can send Chloe some money to do that. So Chloe is going to take care of the chat. She will ask me questions as you ask me those questions, and we'll have this going through. I will do a presentation, but I am certainly open for questions and concerns that you have. So before we start, two things. Number one, I'm coming to you from just outside Philadelphia. Chloe is a native Philadelphian, so I want to take just a minute to acknowledge the indigenous people whose land we stole to be able to have a place called Philadelphia, the Lenni Lenape Indians. It was theirs. There are many pictures that you see of William Penn making peace with them. And as I understand from history, William Penn was a pretty reasonable fella, but apparently his descendants were not, and did not treat the Indians very well for that. But let's acknowledge that this land was theirs and sacred to them. And second, this is Veterans Day. Very important day. The individuals who served in our military, who are presently serving now, deserve our recognition and our congratulations and our gratitude. One of those veterans is my father, who was a World War II soldier, spent about 18 months abroad, did the European campaign, France to Germany to Poland. He is 99 years old, my father, and still trucking along, God bless him, to do. And I thank him for any number of things, but that's certainly one of them to do. So veterans, salute. You go. So I'm going to jump into the presentation. I'm going to bring up on screen a PowerPoint. Oh no, not another PowerPoint. Yes, another PowerPoint to talk about financial aid for musicians. But first, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about financial aid itself. So let me get to this. We'll go to slideshow from the beginning. Inside. Okay, there we are. Right. So the basics of financial aid for college. I'm going to start first with the basics and move into what can be done for musicians. Show me the money. Right. Now, this, of course, is the time when I tell you something incredibly silly about how to get money. So, for example, you could go into your neighborhood bank and say, hey, you have any extra money that you don't need? I'll take it. I don't know that that would work. You could play the lottery. Not sure that's going to work either. But what I want to take you through is a little bit of history first. And I want to start by apologizing, because I didn't create these rules, and I wasn't around for the passage of this legislature. Oh, I was alive, because I'm 3,000 years old, but it wasn't my doing. And when you kind of get the idea of how complicated this is, you're like, oh, who did this? So let us begin with a little bit of history. A trip back to the 1960s. I began high school in September of 1964. The present system that we have for allocating funding from the government goes back to the Higher Education Authorization Act, which was passed, I believe it was 1965. So I was actually in high school when this all came along. Hard to believe that prior to this time, there was no systematic means that the federal or state governments provided money for college. K through 12 education actually got its start with the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which was only a few years earlier. And with the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, the primary posit was that all children from grades 1 through 12 deserved a free and appropriate public education. Notice I said 1 to 12. Kindergarten is still not a mandated program, by the way. Kindergartens do get federal funding, but it's not a mandated program. But when the Higher Education Authorization Act came along, there were two driving points to this. The first, it is the responsibility of the student and the family to pay for college. So once you graduated from high school, or once you aged out, you reached your 22nd birthday, it is then your responsibility to take over the financial obligations for higher education, whether that's a trade school, a junior college, or a four-year school. Okay? Not like we had before with the 1 through 12. And the second thing is that debt doesn't count. Now, what does this mean? Well, the federal government thought that they did not want to support lifestyles that essentially had what they considered the wrong priority. So if you were spending your money on something that they believed was not necessary and accumulated debt as a result of that, then the government would not take that debt into account when they calculated the money that you would be allocated for higher education. So a car payment seems to clearly be a reasonable debt, doesn't count. Your mortgage payment, pretty reasonable debt, pretty significant debt, doesn't count. So if I have X amount of dollars and my house is paid off, no mortgage, and my car is paid off, no car payments, and you have that same X amount of money, but you're paying $20,000 a year in mortgage and $3,000 a year in car payments, the government looks at us as being equal. You get no modifications, none, for the debt that you accumulate. And I can understand this at a higher level. Frankly, I don't really want my taxpayer money going to families that have a home down the shore when they're asking for money and they have two homes instead of one. I get that. I get that. But understand that debt doesn't count. If you send $800 a month to family living in Israel, because without that, they wouldn't be able to support themselves, there's no way that you can show that on the financial aid forms that the government has. So let's understand the costs of college, because there's really two types of costs. There's the ones that you actually see, the billable costs. So this would be tuition. This would be fees. Okay, fees. There are some colleges that are notorious for putting up the fees, and you end up paying thousands of extra dollars for things like laboratory fees or registration fees. These are separate from tuition, and they can add up. On-campus room and board, if relevant, if you are going to live on campus. These are going to show up directly as college costs. Then there are the indirect costs. Books. Now, students, I think you already know this. You really don't need to be buying a lot of books, especially because you're not going to use that many of them. You can rent books. You can go online and get books. You might not have to buy a lot of books. Supplies, technology needs, off-campus room and board. You're living in an apartment, for example. Personal expenses, travel, at least one pizza per month. these are indirect costs. So you really have to add those in when you're talking about going to college. So it's X amount of dollars for the billable, but okay, it's going to cost some money to get there. It's going to cost $500 for your supplies, and you need to have a new laptop. So there's two types. There's the billable and the indirect. A student's financial need is the difference between the cost of attendance minus any financial assistance that you get from outside scholarships and gifts. Now, we're not counting the money that the government gives you here. So cost of attendance, let's say it's going to cost $20,000 a year to go to the school that you've chosen, but your grandmother's going to give you $1,000. Yay! And you got $2,000 from your local YMCA. So those take away from the cost of attendance. And then the amount that the student and the family is expected to contribute is the estimated family contribution. You will see as we go through this that the people who do these financial aid forms love acronyms. So COA minus EFC is the student financial need. Now, this should be where the happy ending occurs. And I say to you, whatever that number is for student financial need, you'll get whatever you need. It doesn't quite work that way because funding is limited. Federal and state government support is sorely limited. It's gone down proportionally over the last 50 years. The amount, the percentage that the government gives is much less than it was back in the late 60s. And I have to tell you, I went to college in the fall of 1968. So the costs of college in 1968 were absurdly low compared to what they are now. But Cigus, what about inflation? Yes, inflation. Inflation between 1968 and 2020 runs about 200%. Okay. Inflation of college costs is close to 570%. So in my first year, I attended a private school. My first year, my total cost of attendance, both the billable and non-billable, was $2,810 for everything. That same college is close to $72,000 for everything. Can we have a nice yikes? Yikes. Okay. So how does one figure out this estimated family contribution? Well, you don't. The federal government does. The primary instrument is called the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, the FAFSA. Please note that first word, free, the greatest F word in the English language, followed closely by food, which means that the greatest phrase in the English language is free food. And students, when you go to college, you'll really appreciate that. One piece of advice I give anybody going to college, volunteer to help at any event that any college official has, because you will get free food. Whoa. So the FAFSA, which is basically a sort of a modified tax form, is completed online at that website. There is no cost to complete the FAFSA, none. Hence the word free. You may think that you have to pay, but that's because you probably put in ed.com or ed.org. These spammers are very, very tricky, and they'll happily fill out the FAFSA for you for, $180 or so. So please know that the FAFSA is free. If you see somebody trying to make you pay, go away. Report them and go away. What is it? It's a federally managed document. It's going to inquire about income and assets. Income is money earned through working. Assets is money accumulated in savings checkings account. Okay? Those are the meat, so to speak, for what federal and state assistance is based on. Assets are not penalized as much as income, because income is seen as being disposable. The government does give you some protection for assets, realizing that you have to save money, that maybe you have other expenses than college. So it's both income and assets. Both the student and the parent/guardian will complete these forms. The student has to reveal whatever money he or she has, whether that's a savings account, whether that's an accumulated birthday gift, whether it's money that they've made from working over the summer. And students are expected to at least manage some part of the cost of their colleges. So students will be taxed, if you will, worse than parents. Why is that? Well, if you have $3,000 in the bank, what better thing could you do with it than pay for college? You don't have a mortgage, the student. You don't have a car payment. Well, maybe you do. You don't have to worry about kids. You have to worry about yourself. So the colleges, the federal government through the FAFSA, will ask the colleges to take proportionally more of your money than they will from parents. Okay? So FAFSA then calculates this EFC and reports this to the family and to the colleges to which the student would apply. Now, the interesting thing is, as of a couple of years ago, the FAFSA asks for the income, the tax returns 2 years before the student goes to college. So if you're headed off to college in the fall of 2021, it's not the tax returns from 2020, it's the tax returns from 2019. It's called prior year, which sounds a little bit odd, but that's what it is, prior year. Do you see what the problem might be with this? We were in a completely different world in 2019. 2020 has been, to say the least, a very odd year. And many families took a hit with the pandemic. So maybe in 2019, you had decent income, and if it's a two-parent household, maybe both were working, maybe you even had a little extra money. 2020, one of the parents lost his or her job, and you're having a hard time making ends meet. But now the college has your 2019 tax information. So right away, if any of you have seniors this year, right away, you're going to need to write a letter and enclose 2020 information to the colleges to which your students apply. Yes, it's an extra. Yes, it's more work. But if there's a real difference between 2019 and 2020, please go ahead and do this. Colleges will not resent it. They want to do the best they can to help you. It's not their fault that they don't have an unlimited amount of money. Well, actually, there are some that do. We'll get to that later. They do. But please understand that if the pandemic really caused your financial situation to plunge, you will need to reach out to the colleges and inform them of that. Because for all they know, 2019, you were like, whoa, look at us, we're doing great. They wouldn't know that anything happened in 2020. So where does this actual money come from? Well, the federal government and the state. Each state has its own what's called Higher Education Assistance Authority. And you typically are going to be directed to answer several more questions at the end of the FAFSA so that the state can get information from you. The amount that the state gives you could well be more than what the federal government gives you. It really depends on what you qualify for. Okay? States are typically variable in their ability to pay. I know, for example, Pennsylvania's ability to pay is less than New Jersey's ability to pay for a student that has the same income and assets. So this is going to depend on the state and what they allocate for higher education. Okay? But that's where this source of money comes from. Private scholarships that are awarded by a college or community organization are not included with this. Not included with this. Okay? Now, when you get the cost of attendance minus this estimated family contribution, the college will take into account how much of its own money that they want to give you. So maybe you get $5,000 from the federal government. Maybe you get $20,000 from the college. Or maybe you get $3,000 from the federal government and you get $0 from the college. Again, it depends on the funding that the college has for you. So what kind of aid can you expect? Well, there's free money, scholarships and grants. Okay. What's the difference between a scholarship and a grant? A grant is specific. A scholarship is open for anything. This is money that does not have to be repaid. This is the best kind of money. It's free money. Whoa. Okay. Loans are money that must be repaid over a period of what can reach 10 years. Subsidized loans. This is where the government actually pays your interest for you. Then when you graduate, after 90 days, you begin to repay your loan. Unsubsidized loans, you get only a 90-day grace period, and then the repayment begins. Why would somebody get well, it depends on whether you qualify. Again, this is based on income and assets. So if they're lower, you might get a subsidized loan. If they're higher, it might be an unsubsidized loan. Why would you take these loans? Why wouldn't you just go to your corner bank? They know you. They'll give you a great rate. Yeah, no. There's no lower rate for borrowing money than the student loan program. The interest rates for subsidized loans this year were under 2%. You can't get money for that level anyplace else. I mean, my son won't lend me money for that amount. So you know what? This is cheap money. The unsubsidized loans can go up to 4.2, 4.3, but even that's pretty low. Because you'll find if you go down to the local corner bank, we're talking here 6, 7, 8%. So that's substantially different. I mean, a 4% loan versus an 8% loan, that's not a 4% difference. That's a 100% difference. It's twice as much that you pay. And then there's a third called the work study program, the college work study program. This is not just getting a job on campus. This is a federally funded program. The way it works is that the government pays 75% of the student's salary and the college kicks in the other 1/4. So if Chloe is working at the library in her college and she's making $10 an hour, her college is paying $2.50 of that, and the federal government is paying the other $7.50. These jobs are reserved. These are held for students who qualify for work study. And I can tell you from experience, these are some of the better jobs on campus, like working in the library. Or the best job ever, babysitting the field house. You sit there for 3 or 4 hours at a time. You give out 4 towels, 3 basketballs, and 7 tennis rackets. You listen to music and you do your homework. And you get paid. Sign me up. Of course, the worst job is working in the cafeteria, in the dining hall, because anytime people are unhappy with the food, you're the one, you get blamed for that. So let's try not to do that one to do. Okay. You can also, unbeknownst to most, you can also do your work study outside the college campus at a nonprofit institution if the college gives you permission. So, for example, you decide that you're going to minor in music, you're not going to abandon music, but you want to pursue the so-called pre-med curriculum to become a physician. If the college gives you permission, you could work at the local hospital down the block because that's a nonprofit. Okay. Okay. Are there any other forms that a family has to complete for financial aid? Well, yes, there are. There's something called the College Scholarship Search Profile, and that's required by roughly 200 individual colleges and scholarship programs. This comes from the College Board. And we all know how much we love the College Board. Not, right? It is not free. It is not free. There's a registration fee and a separate cost for each individual college. This is not free, okay? You would think if you were looking at this on the internet and somebody said to you, hey, if you pay me money, I'll tell you where to get more. You'd be like, stop, this is a scam. But it actually isn't. The analysis that they do is actually quite generous. And if it turns out that you need a school, you need to fill out a profile for a school, there's a very good chance that you will get more money in the long run because the profile analyzes things more thoroughly. So now your mortgage counts. They actually look at that. So if you send $800 a month to relatives in Israel, this now counts. So it's a much deeper dive. And that allows the individual colleges to use their own institutional methods. Most of the schools that use the profile have a pretty large endowment, even after what COVID did. And colleges, many colleges are hurting from that. But the endowments of some schools, like just take, for example, Princeton University. Princeton University's endowment at the beginning of this year was $14.4 billion. Billion. Like what? $14.4 billion. So they can afford to give money to a lot of people. The profile, for sure, is more tedious and complex than FAFSA, but it is well worth your time and your effort. Now, if some of you watched the show Twin Peaks years and years ago, you might recognize that title. Some things are not what they seem. Twin Peaks talked about the owls. The owls are not what they seem. So you would normally assume that the colleges that cost less would be the better bargain. And there are some schools now that have broached the $75,000 a year barrier. But many of these most expensive schools are the most generous with their financial aid packages. And they can actually cost less than the so-called bargain schools. Okay? This is not something that's inherently obvious, but it's like the difference between the sticker price and the actual price. Most families don't actually pay the sticker price. So look at this. Here's two schools in Pennsylvania. Penn State, Pennsylvania State University, is the flagship state-supported university. If you are an in-state student, your cost of attendance is $36,444. The average financial aid amount given to a Penn State student is $6,357, and the actual cost is $29,987. Let's compare that to the University of Pennsylvania, a private school, one of the so-called Ivy League schools. The cost is $71,715, which gets a yikes. But the average financial aid is $43,031, the average. So now your actual cost is more than $1,000 less than Penn State. Less than Penn State. Now, do you qualify for the average amount of, I don't know. My point here is don't just look at the sticker price. Of course, don't accumulate all colleges that cost zillions of dollars, but don't let the sticker price stop you from looking at a school. Here's another one. This is New Jersey. Rutgers is the state university, the major state university in New Jersey, right? So Rutgers, the cost of attendance is $33,457. Average financial aid, I'm calling you out here, Pennsylvania. The average financial aid at Rutgers is twice what you would get at Penn State. Thank you, New Jersey, right? Oh, and by the way, those of you who are not on the East Coast, New Jersey actually is a separate state, okay? So the actual cost of Rutgers then for an in-state person is $20,516. About 20 miles south of New Brunswick is a place called Princeton, New Jersey, where Princeton University is located. So their cost of attendance is $74,150, which gets an eek. The average financial aid is $52,670, and the actual cost is less than $1,000 more than Rutgers. Less than $1,000. And there's a Wawa on campus at Princeton. For those of you who do not live anywhere between New Jersey and Virginia, Wawa is this fabulous convenience store that we all love. Look at this. So please don't let the sticker price stop you. Don't accumulate expensive colleges, but don't let the sticker price stop you. It's the actual price that matters. And guess what? You have a way of finding that out. As of the fall of 2017, all colleges that receive federal funding. Wait, don't all colleges? No. There are about a dozen schools that refuse federal funding because they don't want to abide by federal guidelines. Okay? But most of the ones you'll do, they must provide on their website something called a net cost calculator, where you can go on the website. So let's say you wanted to attend the University of Virginia. You go to www.uva or Virginia, whatever it is, .edu. You go to the admissions website and you find where it says net cost calculator. You enter your income and your assets. It'll take you 30, 40 minutes to do this, but you then get an estimate by law within 5% of what a family of your means would have received in the previous year. No guesswork. You have a solid idea of what the actual cost of that college will be. So if you do the calculations and Virginia says, okay, you're gonna have to pay $40,000 a year, maybe you decide to apply someplace else. But if they say you only have to pay $11,000 a year, you're thinking, okay, I can do that. Because if you went to your local community college and took a full schedule, that would cost you about $8,000 a year. So yeah, that's a pretty good deal if you only had to pay $11,000 for Virginia. But there's no guesswork now. That's my point. You can go on to each college, do the calculations by the net cost calculator, and find out what you'd be expected to pay. So where else can you get financial support? Well, the FAFSA and the profile only calculate need-based aid, depending on income and assets. Students are also eligible for merit-based aid. How do you get merit-based aid? 4 typical ways. Academic achievement. So GPA, And up until this year, test scores. Most schools would have a grid. So on the y-axis would be your SAT or ACT. On the x-axis would be your GPA. And the closer you came to a slope of 1, the more money you would get. So real high SAT, real high GPA gets the most money, and then anything in between. Many schools have done away with the responsibility of taking a standardized test because of all the difficulty students had actually trying to get the test this year. I mean, I can tell you horror stories of students that drove hours to try to take one of these tests, or how many times a student emailed me on a Saturday morning and said, I showed up and there's a sign on the door saying we're closed. What a mess. What a mess. So many schools have divorced themselves from having that particular responsibility. So these schools are only doing GPA. You can get a merit scholarship for athletic prowess. The recruited athletes that earn scholarships, don't fool yourself. This is merit-based aid. They're getting that because they're really good at their sport. They do. You can get it for artistic skills, for drawing, for painting, for music, for dance, any of the visual and performing arts, and you could get it for community involvement and service. These scholarships stack, meaning if you get this amount of money for need, and then you get another scholarship for merit, they don't take away the need. They stack with each other. Okay? You can qualify for both, certainly. If you qualify for need-based aid, you can certainly get any one of these merit-based scholarships. Okay? Where does merit aid come from? Well, mostly the colleges themselves. So, for example, my old college, Swarthmore, has something called the McCabe Scholarship. They only give 6 per year, but the McCabe Scholarship is merit-based. Boston University has a trustees scholarship, 40 per year, 20 full tuition, 20 half tuition. Many colleges have presidential scholarships, which can be anywhere from half tuition to full tuition. So mostly they're the scholarships themselves. Merit-based aid can also come from community organizations, national foundations. Coca-Cola sponsors a merit scholarship. Wendy's sponsors a merit scholarship. Burger King, a lot of different places. And there are also private sources for these. And you'll be happy to know, my dear musicians, that music is the most well-supported art or performance major among merit scholarships nationwide. In fact, the 2 best supported majors of all are music and engineering. The 2 best supported majors for merit-based aid are music and engineering. Okay? So where do I get some of this money? Well, many colleges will set aside individual scholarships for vocalists and instrumentalists, with your audition, your pre-screening, and your interview as your determining factors. Academic achievement is also considered, but it's really not as important as some of these colleges might make it out to be. I would say, for example, even a school like NYU or Carnegie Mellon, if you really nail your audition, you don't have to have taken 97 AP courses to be able to be admitted. And the parallel here is the recruited athlete who earns a scholarship for their sport. A musician earns a scholarship for their instrument or for their voice. And to be honest, there's a lot of parallels between athletic recruiting and music recruiting, because you can utilize music as a hook to help you, A, get into college, and B, get some merit money for that college itself. You look at what the orchestra needs. You're a bassoon player. They need a bassoon. Ah. So those kinds of things, just like if I'm a basketball player and I see that that program needs a guard, they already have a center. I don't want to be a center. So it's the same way with athletic recruiting, how that works. Where's all the money? Well, folks, it's right here. The Majoring in Music website. If you click on this link, you will have 7 pages worth of scholarships directly related to music. There are dozens listed there. This is by far the most comprehensive, the most accurate, and the most up-to-date site. There's also a lot of other great information on majoring in music, about audition, insight on the colleges. You can do a little like comparison, looking at different schools. So let's say if you're thinking about, do I want to go conservatory? Do I want to go College of Music? Majoring in music will give you some tips on how to figure that out. And then you'll be able to then compare colleges next to each other and see what they have for you. But this is the best source of where you can get money for music. Now, you can also earn money through music. You can do gigs. You can play at a wedding. You can play at a bar bat mitzvah. You can play. There's any number of different things you can do as a music performer. But these are the scholarships. These are the actual scholarships. Now, I cover this when I talk about the Instruments for Success group in Project 440, but you will find out that the auditions are all different, and so will be the criteria for each of these scholarships. It's your job. You have to do the research and find out what's expected of you to do that, okay? When are these financial aid forms and scholarship applications due? The FAFSA and the profile open on October 1st of the student's senior year. So for any of you who are seniors now, you can start filling out those forms. You should do it as soon as possible after October 1st, because financial aid is on a case-by-case basis. And if you wait until January, the money might be gone, or the money might be much more limited. So it's to your advantage to bring in those forms as soon after October 1st. Merit scholarships, much more varied. Some are due around the same time as the FAFSA. Others are due as late as February. So the thing here is to do your research. Again, this is your responsibility as a student, and consult each college's website, okay? Where do you find more information? Well, the federal government student aid site, it's not quite where FAFSA is, but FAFSA is part of it, studentaid.gov. The National Association of Financial Aid Administrators, finaid.org. I have to give a shout out to Mark Kantrowitz, who's the man who manages this site. Mark is a giver. He does this pro bono, and he is amazing. He is amazing. You'll find a lot of great information there. And then the financial aid office website of each individual college will have information, general information, and also information about that school itself. Okay. That's it, folks. Ask me questions. Chloe, what do we have?
So far I'm not seeing any questions just yet, but I'm sure people are typing them up and sending them in. So I guess we could give it a minute or two.
So I'll answer some questions now, because I was actually a contestant on Jeopardy. So I know what the answers are to a lot of things. So the first answer is no, you're not getting any of my money. That's the first answer. Not that I have any money, but.
Oh, okay, here we go. Are there any states that are known for giving more aid?
Yes, actually, New Jersey is a very generous state. Massachusetts is a very generous state, but you must be a resident, a citizen of that state to get the money from the state. Pennsylvania is a cheapo. Sorry, Pennsylvania, but you're a cheapo.
Our next question is it possible to get a scholarship for music if you decide not to major in music? Like, say you want a minor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, I want you to think of this the way you would think about sports. There's varsity sports, there's varsity music. So those are the music majors. Those are the individuals who have first shot at the orchestra, at the chorus, and at the ensembles. There's club sports and there's club music. I don't mean like disco club, but club music, right? These are sponsored by both the Department of Music and by the student government organization, which funds them as well. These are your minors in music. These are individuals who are invited to try out. Just like if you're an athlete, you hear that word invited walk on. They don't have the big money to give you an athletic scholarship, but they know you're good. So they invite you to walk on. They give you a smaller scholarship. And who knows, if you turn out to be an amazing player, you can get a larger scholarship later in your college career. Same thing with music. I mean, you can't fill an orchestra just with music majors unless you're in a conservatory. I mean, think of a school like the University of Pennsylvania. Penn has 11,000 students. How many music majors graduated last year from Penn? The answer is 7. 7 out of 11,000. Not going to get a pretty big orchestra with 7 people. So the other 60 spots are filled by people who are either minoring in music, who are proficient enough in music that they audition successfully. So the answer is yes. Will you get a substantial scholarship? Probably not, unless it turns out that you have a talent, a special talent, or a needed talent that the school really wants.
All right. We have about 4 minutes left, and we do have another question. Someone asked, what about scholarships for international students?
Scholarships for
international students.
International students. International students, if they are not U.S. citizens, cannot get money from the federal government or from the state government. And most colleges and universities cannot budget for them. The ones that can are the ones that are the more generous. So, for example, a school like Swarthmore, which has a large endowment, will give financial aid to international students. Merit scholarships, however, are different because that money comes from the institution. So you tend to have a little bit better chance of getting a merit-based scholarship as an international student. And hopefully now with the change in administrations, with Joe Biden coming on as a president, those restrictions for students coming into the US will be loosened and international students will be welcome again. I welcome that the international students will be back.
Okay. So the next question is, if you could share your slides, that would be great for the students watching to kind of just refer back to that. And then on top of that, or what were you going to say?
I could do that. I could share the slides, sure.
Awesome. And then our next question is, do you have any more recommendations for finding scholarships? Because you mentioned FastWeb on your Instagram Live.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that, Chloe. Say that again.
Do you have any more recommendations for finding scholarships? Because you mentioned using FastWeb on your Instagram Live.
Oh, sure. FastWeb. That's right. I was on Instagram. Look at me. Actually, it's not my account. It was 440's account. I was also on the Facebook for the first time. It's like, whoa. I'm like, I'm not a dinosaur anymore. Dinosaur. Right? So FastWeb is a great web search. It's the most thorough, the most accurate, and the most current of all the regular web searches. Now, these are not just music scholarships. These are all kinds of scholarships. So I would use FastWeb. I would use the College Board's scholarship search. As much as I hate giving any credit to College Board, their web search for scholarships is very, very good. I would absolutely use theirs. And then There's a website called collegescholarships.com, which is not as good, but may have some that some of the other ones don't.
All right, awesome. So that was our last question, actually, because we're running out of
And then
time.
I thought of one more thing. We were talking about international students. Let's reverse that. If you're a US student and you want to study music at McGill in Canada, which has a phenomenal music program, Canadian institutions are less expensive than US institutions. You will not get financial aid from a Canadian school, but you could get some merit aid from a Canadian school. So that should not prevent you if you want to study outside the United States.
Awesome. All right. There's a couple more questions, and unfortunately, we've run out of time. But Cigus, if you could possibly share your contact information for students to reach out to you with a question, that'd be awesome.
Sure. I have the easiest email address in the world. It's my first name, Cigus, Cigus, at cigus.net. Cigus at cigus.net. And you can follow up. I will answer your questions. It might not be right away, but I will definitely answer your questions. Or at least give you a reference that could.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you, Cigus, for this awesome seminar. I'm sure it was really helpful.
Oh, thank you, Chloe, for your service. This is great.
Of course. All right.
Good luck to everybody. Enjoy the rest of the sessions in the fair, and I wish you all well. Have a good night.
Bye.